The Evan Williams is pretty good. I'm enjoying it.
Evan Williams?
Yeah.
I've never had that before.
And the Old Crow, that's been my go-to here lately. And I'm starting to pick up on little things like the finishes of it. It's starting to come to me a little bit, as far as the distinction between the different brands and the flavor and stuff. It's sort of like the beer. It's sort of like it's slowly you gain a little bit more and a little bit more, and it doesn't happen overnight because this is completely new to me.
Right, same here. And don't use up all that Old Crow though. Don't use up all that Old Crow because we got to do a.
No, I got that 1 liter bottle is almost 34 ounces, so I'm going to have some of it for a pretty good while. People call these pints. They're not pints. The metric system has been in place in the liquor business for a long, long time. I wish they were pints, but they're not. These are only actually about 12.7 ounces versus 16. So we're not getting anything really close to a pint. With this, it might be a good thing, arguably, but anyway.
You're right. Yeah, they were required in 1980 to go to the metric system, but the whole United States was supposed to do it, but then remember that never happened.
That's true. Yeah, we sort of stubborn about that. People like their ounces and stuff like that, but these
in elementary school they were training us. They were saying that's it. By 1980, it's gonna all be metric, and so we were just
how much
prepared.
Simpler it was, how and everything. But
okay, so hello, folks. We're talking about a blended whiskey. I had done I did a few side-by-sides with some other brands, and then William Carolina said he got a hold of it, so he wanted to do a joint examination, and I said, okay.
You've given this brand much more publicity than it ever deserved. People now know what Kentucky Dale is.
And in the last 6 months than it got in the first 40 years, I guess.
I'm sure it has. These a member of the 2080 category.
Yeah, we just, we're kidding, but actually, it is a pretty good seller. I see it in a lot of places, and they wouldn't keep it stocked on the shelves if it didn't move.
Yeah, in the liquor store here I'm at, and there are 4 or 5 of these brands that are the 2080s. So somebody's buying them. They wouldn't keep stocking 4 or 5 different ones if people didn't, if there wasn't a market for it.
You're right. We don't have liquor stores here, as you know, because every store sells liquor. So I would say that any retail outlet has, if not this one, they'll have something similar to it. Here's the label. They may have changed it in 40 years. I don't know. It's produced in, I believe, Frankfort, Kentucky. You have a slightly bigger bottle. I have a 200 milliliter. You have a 375. Yeah, Frankfort, Kentucky, Sazerac Company, which is the Buffalo Trace Distillery.
Actually, my information showed that this was a Barton brand, was distilled in Bardstown. These labels get very confusing. But that's what I saw. So who knows? But that's
it should say right on the. I was reading the Tax and Trade Bureau website too long ago, and they were saying that the label has to disclose exactly what location it's distilled in. So you should have an indication down there at the bottom.
Mine is covered over by the UPC code here. I couldn't peel it off really. Right here, there's a white label there.
Oh yeah, mine is the UPC is embedded in the label.
Okay, yeah.
And it says Sazerac Company, Frankfort, Kentucky. But it might have been one of those Barton brands that they bought 8 years ago, 9 years ago, and 8 years ago, 2009. Look like a tavern sign, I guess, right? Isn't that the label's trying to look like a sign on a tavern?
And that's what it appears to me like.
Perhaps. It's like a wooden tavern sign that would hang.
I got this 375 bottle for $2.99. So
I had to pay $249 for this one. You remember, if you remember back last year when I bought this, they had a special in New Orleans, which was 2 of these bottles for $4. When I was at the Exxon station in Hammond, Louisiana, the other day, on right off next to US Highway 51, they had this for $249, and I said, well, for $2, I'll just go ahead and buy it because I know you wanted to do it. Jean-Pierre,
excuse me, I got this one in South Carolina, right across the border. I was in Charlotte. I had to go down there for a reason one day, and it was only about 5 miles away at a Frugal McDougal.
Oh, right.
And I saw this there and picked up along with a couple other things, but they had a huge selection. They had one display of Jack Daniels that was just like, it was almost a store within a store itself. You can see why the high profile they have. They're like the Harley Davidson of whiskey, and just a massive display.
Wow. Did they have the green label?
I think they had, I believe so.
Yeah, we can't get that here, sadly. Okay, Jean-Pierre is joining as a live chatter. He says he's enjoying some tequila. What? While watching y'all this Saturday. Jean, it's Sunday.
Too much tequila.
How much? Yeah, and I thought, didn't he tell me he does not drink hard liquor, which is why he doesn't appear on these? You are, Jean-Pierre. Okay. So I have had 2 bottles of this already. I drank 2 bottles, you know, this 200 milliliter. Now, let me say this before we get started on the tasting. I was at a store here in this town on last Thursday, and I went to that little kind of a flim-flam shop, but I went in there and he had the bottles, the glass 750 milliliter bottles for $6.99. So that would have been the best option to get your best price per ounce, right?
Yeah, that's cheap for that.
It was $6.99. Yeah, $6.99 for that. And he also had the Heaven Hill Kentucky whiskey for $6.99. I guess that's its top competitor around here.
Yeah, those are brands that they don't even list on the Heaven Hill website. They're not listed. Some of them are
listed, but you got to search, and I found them all. There's a section on the Heaven Hill website where every brand is listed with the bottle size and whether it's glass or plastic. But you prefer if you didn't find that.
Beam has a separate PDF file, like for the 8-star and those brands. They're sort of obscure, but you can find them if you search hard enough. But they obviously they're
Beam
not
has the PDF file. No, Beam has the PDF file, but on the Heaven Hill website, and it's probably on there for your distributors to use if they want to make orders. Okay, I doubt many consumers are going to do that.
Some of them have.
Look at that, but yeah, the ones that they showcase have the photos and the history of the product, and same thing with Sazerac. The ones they really want to push, they're going to have even the list of awards and all of that. Things like this, Sazerac. Now, but I'll give Sazerac credit because they won't just give you a listing, a PDF file. They will actually give you a page for each product with a photograph of each bottle size, which I thought was impressive. You know, I've got a link posted here right now for the Sazerac company. I can look over there. And it's showing all the bottles, and it's got a photo of each, which is nice.
And I think it lists the UPC codes.
It lists the UPC codes, whether it's in a glass, plastic bottle. It gives the case packing bottles, the case weight per pounds, the cases per layer, and the cases per pallet, which is obviously information that you're going to use more than a typical consumer, I would imagine. An attractive bottle. If you look at those full-size bottles, it is the full-size glass bottle. It is an attractive looking, you know what I mean? It's not just junky looking.
It doesn't scream like worthless. I mean, it's a decent looking label, logo, and everything. It's just It just happens to be 80% neutral grain spirits, aka rectified spirits, aka ethyl alcohol of agricultural origin. That's my favorite one. But aka vodka. You could basically say it's vodka.
It's been distilled so much, so it's been distilled so repeatedly distilled to where it's basically pure alcohol. But it's useful. It has great it has great use. And if you look on the website for the Luxor's Everclear, there's a discussion of the use of it. And in fact, Sazerac has their own brand, and they talk about that too, that how it can be used to, like they'll say, like make your own, you can make your own drinks or whatever with this. I'd have to look it up, but it's there.
It can be the base for an endless amount of alcoholic beverages. And right.
So it's a, it's a base.
And there's the one facility in Indiana, the MPG, which churns out tons of this stuff. Many of your...
That's where a lot of your Seagram's products come from. Also, it was formerly a Seagram's distillery, from what I read.
It was used to be called Lawrenceville, LDI, Lawrenceville Distributors of Indiana, was bought out by the conglomerate MPG. And a lot of the bourbon enthusiasts often use that, they try to track down the origin of the genesis of some of these brands. And a whole lot of them wind up going to MPG, the source. And which creates sort of an amount of controversy as far as the transparency or lack thereof among the brands, some of the craft whiskey bourbons and such. So it's been sort of a bone of contention for a lot of bourbon enthusiasts.
In other words, they're wondering if it's truly a craft bourbon.
Yeah, it sounds familiar, doesn't it? From the
like with the beer. This particular blended whiskey has been on the market, from what I was able to find, it started out in 1976. That's when the trademark was granted. So it's been around 41 years. I've seen it, like I said, all around. So I want to show you a few things I picked up on my over the weekend trip. I was staying with my father. I picked up Taylor Madeira, and I'd never seen it in a store. We get the Marsala everywhere, but not the Madeira. So it's $6.99, and I said, I've got to get it. 18% alcohol, boy. Now, you wouldn't want to drink too much of that wine. Now, some of the places you want to travel around and look at are these sort of forlorn, the best days have passed them up, corner grocery stores, convenience stores around here, because they will keep stuff in stock. And who knows where they got it?
The little hole in the wall shop.
Correct. But they'll make a deal with you. Usually they're Arab owned. That's not a disparaging statement. It's just a truthful statement that I've developed from empirical evidence. So I went into that store yesterday, and I said, he had this incredibly large amount of smaller bottles of whiskey, of liquor. And I couldn't even see it all. He said, you can come behind the counter. He must have been about 30 years old. He said, you can come behind the counter and look. And I couldn't believe it. It was so much stuff. It was caked with dust. So I'm looking. There's no prices really on anything. And I found this Carstairs White Seal, American blended whiskey since 1788. Well, that's when the company was founded. But I found out from my search that this particular brand, the White Seal, came out in 1940. It's a 375 milliliter plastic bottle. Well, that piqued my interest because that's a Sazerac brand, which I've never in my life seen anywhere. Then I found Ansac cognac. You can see how chipped up this label is from just humidity or whatever. I had to wash them off. It's got a night on it. It's VS cognac, and it's from Jarnac, France. It's a glass bottle. It's 200 milliliters. So I said, look, and he had a scotch. The name of the scotch was, I forgot to look, but when you picked it up, you could hear a little bell inside of it. It was so strange. There was a little bell inside the bottle, tinkling. He said, "Oh, I'll sell that for $12." Well, I just set that right back down. I said, "Well, how about these other two?" Oh, he's thinking. You can see they're covered with dust. I'll tell you what, I'll sell both of them for $7 total. I said, "You got a deal." So I went home and I washed them off with hot water, and there we go. You won't find that in a legitimate grocery store.
No,
that was on US. Man.
One of those little hidden finds.
Oh, I'm gonna pay him a revisit. All right. Well, I guess we better get going on this. You've had this before, right?
Yes.
When I did my initial review, my opinion was that it was not bad, but it tasted flat. And I don't mean without carbonation. I mean the flavor was flat. You know what I mean? But I'm willing to re-examine it. If you ever run across that car stairs, let me know. We could look at that one.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, it's on the Sazerac website. It's one of those brands they picked up, got a hold of. They used to have magazine ads for car stairs, but it's one of those companies that hit the skids and they took it over. I poured mine in a whiskey glass, Jack Daniel's whiskey glass. It's caramel color, or what's that, chestnut? Got some good alcohol eggs on it. Now, whoa. So that's a pretty big helping there.
I was looking at the whiskey color chart, and one color they referred to as khaki. There were about 10 different colors.
Darker than khaki.
It would fall between a gold and the amber, I think, maybe between number 2 and 3 on that chart.
And I believe on the Sazerac, there are some educational sections. I know there are. Well, we do know one thing, Mr. William. We know this is not using caramel color art. And why do we know that? Caramel color or flavorings, it has to be disclosed for whiskey, not for other liquors.
And there was, I mentioned, I think we're talking about the ruling in 1907 during the Taft presidency was when they finally arrived upon the blended whiskey as being the official name for this stuff. Before, they were mentioning words like imitation and things like that. But Taft was a judge. I think he later served on the Supreme Court, and they pretty much settled that then. So this is blended whiskey.
Yeah. William Henry Taft was the something while I'm talking. He was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for about 10 years. But like you said, he was a fan of blended whiskey, so he ruled that they did not have to call it imitation.
Which was a relief to those who were pushing the imitation whiskey. Imitation would have been the kiss of death, I think, as far as labeling went. So blended sounds, I know, and at 20%, 80% neutral grain spirits, but that 20% means that it can be called a blended whiskey. But
and that's the minimum. That's the minimum. It has to be at least 20%.
But the color, looking here, the color of this is in line with. I mean, it doesn't look any different than a lot of the other whiskeys. There's nothing, looks. No. It's in line with everything else in that regard.
20% added to that clear rectified spirit does give it the color. And I guess some aging, you know. So what about the aroma?
The one thing I'm thinking of is antiseptic. That's the first thing that popped into my head. Nothing that would entice you to say, I can't wait to take the first sip, but, you know, and then a mild sweetness, but it is bland. It's bland, faint, whatever description you want to use. The aroma is nothing to, you know, but it is what it is in that regard.
I'm picking up, let me see if anybody's making any comments real fast. Okay, let's see. Let me check out the legitimate comments. TRD Politics says, as a bourbon drinker, I've never had this. And as a bourbon drinker, you would probably be angry if you did have it. XKN says, wow, Ronald, such a great insight. What an amazing find. What a riot. Yeah. I don't know about a riot. Like the tequila, Brandon says. Brandon, I've never had tequila, actually. Correct. See about the aroma real fast. It's like you cut, I always say this on my videos. I'm going to keep repeating it, I guess. It's like you cut your leg and you're at the doctor's office and you're waiting on that table for him to come in to stitch it up, laying on your stomach and your leg is propped up and you can smell all that antiseptic. It's going to kill some germs. But also there's a little mint. Honestly, I'm kneeling now because I got tired of sitting. There's a little mint I'm picking up in the aroma, maybe some kind of mint, some kind of wood. Now with that, not Evan Williams, I never had that. With the Beam, Jim Beam, I picked up green wood, like wood that was still green. Here.
Are you talking about the white label, the Jim Beam?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some of that now. I've got a small bottle, and I picked up some of that on the finish of that one.
The greenwood?
Yeah. One thing I noted about it. But
did you get any of that moldy or that mossy aroma?
I didn't detect anything like that, but you know, that's just, I've just had a couple of little glasses of it. So sometimes, you know, next time I could try it, I could discover something completely different. You know, everything is.
I can get a hold of a 100 milliliter bottle of that stuff for $1.99 if you ever want to look at it.
I got a 200 mil. I mean, I've still got more than half of it left.
Proper exam. I'd love to get a proper bottle though. You know, it feels so much better out of that glass 750. But what about the flavor?
I'll take a sip of it now. Cheers to KD.
Cheers to KD. Depends on which KD you're talking about. Clink. I'll go get the other KD while you talk. Well, when I do the little sip through my teeth in the front of my mouth, I pick up a little paper, like paper.
I try to do the chew like they mentioned on the Jim Beam website. But this does.
Yeah, that's right. They have a little.
It does have some flavor.
Jim Beam has that tasting protocol.
If you roll it over the tongue and just keep it in there, and it just has sort of an indistinct sweetness to it. To me, there's nothing, you know, flavors don't pop out like rocks candy or nothing like that. But it's not, I don't find it disgusting or repulsive. I mean, and at that price, I mean, I think it's drinkable. Maybe I have a iron gut. I don't know, but
There's certainly nothing foul or unusual, or as they said on the Proof 66 liquor review website, that it might present some, but I don't find it present anything exotic necessarily. It's not presenting anything bountiful or anything, but
and
it does have some.
And for a mixer, $2.99 for $3.70. I mean, not bad, really. I mean, you take that, you got 40% alcohol here. You mix 3 ounces of your favorite whatever, you've got a 10% drink, 10% alcohol drink. Or double it, make 6 ounces versus 2 of this. And, you know, on a hot day, this might be relatively pleasant. And cheaper than some of these
if you went to
buy pre-mixed and stuff.
And if you went to a lot of these taverns and pubs and bar rooms and you asked for a mixed drink, there's a very good chance that this is going to be down in that. They're going to have a big plastic 175 bottle down in there to use for those drinks. Wouldn't you imagine?
I had heard that Kentucky General was a popular behind the bar brand.
I think Beam's 8 Star, because I went to New Orleans and I went to this place called Dorgnac's. It's kind of a well-heeled grocery store, sort of in a better part of town. They call it Old Metairie. And they have a lot of Beam's 8 Star on that shelf, and it's in the big plastic jugs. And I'm thinking that people are buying that for New Year's Eve party, whatever, and they're doing a lot of mixed drinks. And I'm imagining a lot of bar rooms around there are having it. And I was impressed with the Beam's 8 Star because it's similar to this. A lot of characteristics, probably more than the one we're drinking. Although I have to admit, I had a 2005 bottle, and it was a 75-25 blend, and reduced to the 80-20, which is sort of like the norm today. I guess they said, well, that's the minimum. We're all going to go drop to the minimum. And once one company did it, they all did it.
Yeah, if one company sneezes, they all get a cold. That's the so.
In the 60s, what am I saying? Back in the 1930s, the blended whiskeys looked like they were 65-35 and dropped to 75 at 80-20, and it's not going to drop anymore because that's the limit.
What I've read among like the whiskey enthusiasts and those in the know, that the best bang for the buck in spirits is in this whiskey bourbon category, because there's so much regulation, the constant eye of the government over these companies, that even something like this is not that bad. You know, so it helps it helps the consumer in a sense, because I'm not for over-regulation in a lot of things. I'm laissez-faire, but in this case, because it is so legislated, so much oversight, that you're actually getting a decent product for most of it, especially, you know, if you get above this into maybe the mid-level stuff like an Evan Williams or something. Pretty darn good whiskeys for the price. Right.
I agree with that. And you're talking about those regulations. Those regulations are pretty complex, and they're pretty. It's a pretty strict regimen.
They're much more lax on stuff like rum and vodka and things like that. They can take more leeways. But when it comes to these products, you know, like in the whiskey/bourbon category, very strict control.
Right. And with brandy, it's not as strict. I'll give you an example. The brandy, they have all kind of exceptions. If you read that T and B, you can use coloring. They do not have to disclose it. They can if they choose to, but they can use caramel color, and it is not required to be disclosed. Use natural flavors. It is not required to disclose it. And I had the one Sazerac product that was almost undrinkable. I drank it. And it's popular here, believe it or not, but it's called Hartley Brandy. It's from Italy, but it's bottled in Kentucky. What a nightmarish product. And now I had the VS. Now the one we're getting around here today is the VSOP. I don't think it's a true VSOP. I think that's that long. Oh my goodness, it's about $6.99 for a full bottle, regular size bottle, and that stuff was just jarring. Every time I took a sip, I was making this face like, but maybe I'll buy the VSOP and just give it a chance. I mean, it shouldn't be a problem because they're always having it on sale. They'll even advertise it in the newspaper. The kissing cousin of Kentucky Dale. Here's the other KD.
Yeah.
68. Same company, same recipe, probably, or a very similar recipe. Same. Now this one is Bardstown, however. This one's Bardstown. That's the
Barton 1792 distillery.
Correct. And the other one is from Frankfurt, yeah.
And don't forget, with this, you could do a Dale and Dale.
A Dale.
Rockdale and Kentucky Dale.
Oh, my gosh. Don't mention that.
Another promo for the 5.0%. Classic.
Yeah, rub it in. We can't get it. Hey, theirs is from Frankfurt also. Well, Sazerac owns about, it must be 20 different facilities around the world, from what they said in the newspaper. Is this like Kentucky Deluxe? Brandon asked. Yes, Brandon. I drank the Kentucky Deluxe, and it's very similar. With a cigar or cigarillos. I agree, Jean. I gave up the little cigars for Lent, so I'm starting to think about those a lot. Maybe I'll start having dreams. Okay. I'm going to let you have the final word on, if you would, your final assessment on this Kentucky Dale, and then I'll give you mine, and we'll shut it off. We've been on for over 30 minutes.
I pretty much bought this as a lark after watching your reviews of it and such. And I'm just that type. I'm got a curiosity, and I just wanted to try it. I'm not trying to convince anybody to go out and buy it, but you know, if it's drinkable. I'm surprised that it is as drinkable as it is. When I opened up the bottle, I said, you know, I didn't relate to the horror stories that sometimes these are depicted with. I just don't. I know it would be fun if I could crack one-liners and talk about how terrible and stuff it was. Honestly, I just can't say that. I mean, so
yeah, and some of the reviews are so out of line with reality, and that's the same way with beer and wine. It's so detached from reality. But like you're saying, these people are trying to get a cheap laugh, and they're sort of in a group where they just laugh at each other's not inside jokes, but snarky comments, whatever.
It's so much easier to take that path than to say, well, you know, well, it's not the greatest, but you know, to give an honest assessment of it. And I'm just, that's my impression. So other people may have one completely different, but I'm glad I tried it. And this is just another step on, you know, the whiskey hobby for me.
Right. I would say that you will run into a lot more unpleasant experiences in the beer world with the cheap brands. Like, for instance, what you were showing. Oftentimes made by companies that are not credible or well regarded. Really nasty stuff. With the whiskey and brandy also, you've really got some major companies doing almost all of it. And they've got some pretty, from my experience, pretty high level quality control standards. And they just don't let stuff leave their facility. That's horrific. You know what I mean?
No, it's not like the guy and his cousin are out under the darkness of night distilling this stuff in the backwoods. These are huge, profitable companies, professionally I mean, so it's just sometimes the depiction of it doesn't meet the reality, I don't think, of what it really is. But like I said,
No,
I enjoyed it.
I don't think Heaven Hill or a Sazerac or a Beam is going to let trash leave the facility.
And if you're sort of like of a curious mind, you can try this. So it can establish a baseline for the lower end.
A baseline, right? And this would be a good one to use as a baseline. It would,
and that's pretty much what I've done with it. And I've seen for a baseline, it's not that bad. If this is the bottom rung, then I think I'm going to enjoy the journey up the ladder.
Right, right. My opinion is the same as yours. My opinion is the same as yours. It's not bad. Actually expecting much worse, honestly. I thought, oh, it's going to be some kind of nightmare. But it was far from a nightmare. It's just, it's okay. I think the actual experience does not match the general impression of it. Although we may be wrong, there may not be a widespread bad impression of it, especially since you go in all these, like I'm saying, in Louisiana, grocery stores, and this stuff is in every store and people are buying it. So
yeah, your actual customer might not be the person that's going to come on and make a YouTube hangout. No. So it's the silent majority of the drink are never going to probably say that. You know,
they're not going to make any comment.
They're not going to give it any legitimacy in that sense.
They're going to make is, the only comment they're going to make is with habitual purchases.
Right. It's a buzz in a bottle.
So
a cheap buzz in a bottle.
Right. Right. And I would say that is the same for the Kentucky Dale. I mean, the Kentucky Deluxe. It was the same experience with the Beams 8-star, although I do have to say that I found the 8-star was a notch above, but with a qualifying statement that was a 2005. I do need, I guess, to be fair, I need to buy a modern Beams 8-star and check that out.
There are a couple of others too. One is called Old Mill Stream, Travelers Club, Aristocrat, and Gold Crown are a couple of the other ones that I saw in the liquor store here where I live on the bottom. All of them in the 2080 Club.
I've seen the car stairs. And then what we do, what we did here, you need to shut this up. We have a grocery chain here called Winn-Dixie. And then, of course, we have Walmart. Well, Winn-Dixie has their own label, Winn-Dixie, WD, gin, brandy, scotch, bourbon, and blended whiskey, okay? And they all say, oh, it's a fine bourbon from Kentucky, a genuine bourbon, whatever. But if you look carefully at the label, it's all coming from Bardstown or Frankfurt. So that's telling you right there where they're getting it.
And there's actually one sold at CVS called Jethro T. Bones. A house, their private label whiskey.
I'm gonna have to check that out because we have a CVS here and I have never looked at their stuff like that.
I was shocked to see that. Jethro T.
And it must.
So the saga continues.
And it's probably come from the same outfit.
I'm sure it is. If follow the trail, follow the money trail, and it'll lead you right to the same place with all of these. But it's right.
Well, I appreciate you joining me. And Wednesday night we're going to look at not a private label and not a discount brand anymore. Although at one time it was. Oh, Yuengling.
Traditional lager.
Right. It went from the bottom shelf to the middle shelf. I remember when it was so inexpensive. So, all right. So, and then we'll do the Yuengling Light. And then after that, we'll do the Black and Tan. And we'll see where the future leads after that. Okay. Well, thanks, folks. Thanks, William. I appreciate your idea to do this.
Okay.
William came up with this idea. Okay. Thank you. Y'all take care. That's last legitimate comments. Kentucky Deluxe is good in my opinion, but hurts my stomach. Brandon says, Jim Beam White, don't do that. Well, of course, Jim Beam White is 100% straight whiskey. So there, you got to factor that in. Ronnie S says, hey, Ron, awesome reviews always. Thanks, man. Isn't Yuengling the oldest beer in America? Actually, no, that is not. The oldest lager
is Schaefer.
The oldest brewery. It's the oldest brewery. The oldest brand of beer is what William said, Schaefer from 1842. So anyway, all right. Well, y'all take care.